This is episode 320 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am pleased to be joined this week by Evan Jones. He is a real estate agent and he is also on the board of directors of the Rio Grande Foundation. And we'll talk about his interest and support for the foundation, as well as a lot of pressing issues and interesting dynamics going on in the local and New Mexico real estate markets. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Evan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so this is, I believe, your second interview on the show, and why don't you remind folks who you work for, how they can get in touch with you, so if they're looking to buy or sell a house, they can reach out to you.
Sure. Again, my name is Evan Jones. I am an associate broker with KW. That's Keller Williams Albuquerque. That's the Academy office. My email is jonesnextdoor@kw.com, and my phone number is 505-600-5510.
All right, and I know it's always fun to have those people wanting to buy houses, but at this point, somebody who's selling and able to get a high price for a house right now, those folks are a very valuable commodity.
Sure. Yes, they are. The problem with that, though, is that most people have to sell and buy in the same market.
Yeah.
So you got to roll that gain in your equity into another investment for the most part. Some people are sitting and renting for a while before they buy. They're waiting for market conditions to change. Nobody knows when that's going to happen. But yes, sellers are having a good time right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we'll talk about all those dynamics. But you and I got to know each other because you joined the board of the foundation, and I just wanted to kind of give you a chance to talk about your interest in limited government, individual liberty, and the Rio Grande Foundation before we move on, because it's a role that helps us achieve our goals, and it's something that, as somebody who's obviously interested in the economic health and success of New Mexico and the Albuquerque area, not that you're doing it for personal gain by any stretch, but it's something that you're obviously passionate about. So why don't you talk about that briefly?
So I started to develop this restlessness in my heart about what was happening in New Mexico and in the nation as far as the government was concerned. I saw the government keep getting bigger and bigger, and along with that, I saw freedom starting to get smaller and smaller. More of our money was being taken in taxes. And anyway, I reached out to a friend here in town who's got a prominent position within the federal government, and just asked him, what can I do? And he gave me a couple of different options for people to get in touch with if I wanted to get involved in activism or possibly with a foundation. He gave me a couple of different places and names that I could get involved with. And he said, you might consider Paul Gessing from the Rio Grande Foundation. He's very accessible. If you text him, he'll answer. If you call him, he'll pick up his phone. If you email him, he'll reply. And I said, okay. And I tried somebody else first, and I found out the value of that. Like, I started chasing somebody else around with the Federalist Society, and didn't make any ground at all. And then I called Paul and invited him out to lunch, and he said, sure, let's do that. And we sat down and talked a little bit about our views, and obviously confirmed that our views were very similar. And out of nowhere, he just offered me I just wanted to go to some events and stuff, like know what was going on, and he invited me to interview for the board. So I said, sure, okay, I'm going to have to step up my game here and kind of share my feelings about the principles of liberty and how I feel like they're being infringed upon by the government. And so I did that, and they invited me onto the board. What was that, 2019?
Yeah, it's been a few years now.
Yeah.
And, appreciate it. Of course, if folks are listening, they may not note that Evan's not an extraordinarily young guy, but he is younger than the president of the Rio Grande Foundation. So, it's kind of like Supreme Court justices. You want to name, get the younger crowd.
People that'll live a while and stay on the board for a while.
Yeah, and that's partially due to just having the energy and the capability to handle being on the board, as well as doing all the professional tasks you have going on in your life. And it's always good to have a diverse group on the board, and we've tried to do that. So I
Yeah, we do
appreciate
have
your
a good group.
service and your expertise in this particular area, because it's something that I also think makes great fodder for podcasts, because everybody is involved in the real estate market, whether they think they are or
Right.
not.
They're at some level of it.
And your perspective is very interesting, and you're obviously, again, a younger person, which gives you a perspective on the market, and the view that I think is important to have here, as we've seen kind of an unprecedented shift in the city of Albuquerque and New Mexico. So I guess let's dive into the whole real estate discussion
Sure.
with the brief history, both of yourself and the market. Now, I'd love to hear I want to hear your perspective on real estate itself, but you look at the census data over the last decade, so previous to 2021, the data show that New Mexico and Albuquerque are not growing particularly fast.
Right.
You've been involved in the business long enough to experience part of that, but you obviously were surviving, you were thriving, you were doing okay. Now, that seems to have shifted dramatically here in New Mexico, here in Albuquerque, in the last, I mean, I don't know if you'd say it's COVID contiguous, but
That was a big factor.
yeah,
Things changed a lot.
I would
then.
love to have your perspective on that. So, anyway, talk about your history within real estate as it pertains to some of those broader economic and population trends here in New Mexico.
So, I was born and raised in Albuquerque, was in a completely different kind of business for many years, the jewelry business. And then my wife got into real estate in, I want to say 2016. So, I wanted something different, something that I could be more involved in serving people, helping people, having a positive impact on their financial future, and buying real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth. So I was just like, this is something that I want to try. And so when I got into the business, we were at a much more, that was 2017, the end of 2017, we were in a much more balanced sort of a place. And I just kind of figured that that's the way it was. You come into something and it's just like, this is the way it is. And then you have to think the market's going to change. My first year, I was just trying to get by, just trying to survive and sell a few houses, and then, a little bit of time went on. I started taking more of a serious look at keep staying in the real estate business for the rest of my life, my professional life. So I had to really start getting serious about setting up my business and learning and staying up to date with the market. And I took a leadership role at KW, and then it was kind of smooth sailing for a while. Then COVID hit, and everybody was just like, "What's going to happen?" There were lots of people saying the real estate market's going to crash because the economy is going to suffer so much. And to my amazement, and maybe not everybody's, but to my amazement, 2020 was my best year yet, and this year has actually been even better. I think that one of the factors there is that the Fed is keeping the interest rates low right now, and that's making it so that people can afford a lot more house, because most people are just concerned, can I afford the payment? And the low interest rates are making that possible. I think I looked at them this morning. As of the 17th, they were like 3%, 3.125% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And VA is the same. FHA is actually a little bit lower right now, 2.875, I think. And that's keeping it going because the prices keep going up, because the inventory is so low that people are motivated, because they're just like, I need to get in now because nobody knows when we're at the top of the market. I wish that somebody had that crystal ball. I wish I had that crystal ball. But another big factor.
So hold on, let me jump in on that. You talk about interest rates now. interest rates have been low, and we know that makes a big impact on
Absolutely.
the amount of house you can buy because those interest rates, really dramatically impact what you're going to pay on a monthly basis for a mortgage. But with regard to New Mexico and Albuquerque, interest rates have been low for, I don't know, better part of a decade now.
Historically
Yeah,
speaking, yes, for sure.
but only in the last couple of years, again, COVID contiguous more or less, have has the situation turned into a hot market or unbalanced market, I guess, depending on
Absolutely.
how you, define those terms. What's specifically going on above and beyond the interest rate situation that's impacting us here in New Mexico?
Well, people coming in from out of state. It's like we were talking about before. People are in, we're seeing lots of people move in from California. We've dealt with it several times in the last couple of months with listings where buyers come from California or from other, from the East Coast, mostly the East and West Coast, where real estate is significantly more expensive and the cost of living is significantly more expensive. So people are coming into New Mexico saying, "Hey, for 500 grand, I can get here what would cost me $1.5 million to 2.5 million, depending on where they're coming from." So what this sticker shock that native New Mexicans are seeing, is seen as a bargain by these people coming in from out of state, and they're in my opinion, and I'm fine with people moving here, but I think that they're really contributing to the fatigue that buyers are starting to feel. They'll go in and look at 15 houses, and then they'll make an offer on one after the other and just get killed on it and not get anything. And eventually, if people keep getting beat up like that, they exit the market. And that
Metaphorically beaten up. You're just talking about people in
yeah,
New Mexico who,
it's an emotional process. People get
yeah,
beaten up by that when they're just like they fall in love with a house and then it doesn't
right.
work out.
And just as a point of reference, you mentioned kind of the relative affordability of New Mexico and Albuquerque. Uh, the Albuquerque Journal on Tuesday, July
Right.
13th, had a front page story. Median home price in Albuquerque tops 300,000, which that's pretty high
Yeah,
for
it's
Albuquerque,
like 305.
certainly. But I was just on a family vacation in Northern Virginia, and I can assure you, $300,000 in Northern Virginia is a very modest
Yeah,
home.
sure.
Now, yeah, this is a bit of hypothesizing here, but do you think this is remote workers? Are these people predominantly going to be, or do they have visions of working for, say, Google or Facebook
Right.
remotely
Netflix.
from New Mexico? Or what, in talking to people that you sell these houses to, what do you see as their careers that are enabling them
Right.
to get out of
Yeah.
those high tax, high cost rat race type places
Right.
and come here?
Yeah, they can keep their let's just say East Coast income. We had some people that bought a listing of ours recently that have from Virginia they have the East Coast income and they work remotely, which COVID really opened people's eyes, businesses and employees, to how much can be done without actually being in an office. And it's a lot more efficient in a lot of ways. So people were just like, "Hey, I can move to a place that's lower cost of living and get my East Coast income here. So why not just head out to one of the least expensive places to live in the country? We'll go to New Mexico." I think that that's a huge factor, and that has covered a pretty wide gamut of professions. IT people with in marketing, and people in we've seen people that are like personal coaches and stuff like that, therapists.
Right.
They can have their clients and their patients wherever, and they can just pop into a Zoom meeting and do their thing and live this, what I think is a pretty fantastic New Mexico lifestyle that we have.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of people out there who look at the trends with regard to employment and whether virtual meetings and remote work are going to be persistent trends or not. And I think that's a separate conversation, but one that definitely impacts this discussion. And you know, I think the more interesting aspect of that, and I've heard both sides of the equation here, is that you know employers might be saying to themselves, well, in order to get quality people in the Bay Area, for example, I've got to pay them $250,000.
Right.
Well, maybe if they're working in New Mexico remotely, I can cut that down to $200,000.
Sure.
Or who knows, whatever the market will bear, so to speak, right? And that there could be a little bit of a win-win for both sides, but that's an individual discussion that's going to happen. It'll just be
Sure.
interesting to see how it shakes out. So, so you would confirm, I guess, that a lot of these folks moving in here are West Coast and East Coast people. Now,
That's what we're seeing the most of.
New Mexico is a unique state, and I realize this might be a delicate question, but we all know some of the challenges that we face here. Again, this is really taking the Rio Grande Foundation and your job in a very close, direct way. We talk about crime issues, the school system, those kinds of direct challenges that are going to impact people as they make their lives here, presumably if they have kids and whatnot. What is the impression you get from people who are moving here? Is it, I've read the data, I know what I'm getting into, and we'll be okay? Or do they just not seem informed about things?
It seems it's different. Different people's personalities are different in their approach to moving to a new place and buying real estate and everything. For the most part, I mean, I would say it's half and half for me. People. I had somebody that came from like South Carolina. She ended up renting, but one of the reasons that she ended up renting, she's an ER doc, and she just had this impression that Albuquerque is just this super dangerous place, and she leaves her house and she's going to get mugged. And
well, if you're an ER doc, you probably know better than most. You have your finger on the so-called pulse,
but she
or lack thereof.
She hadn't been here yet, and she was. So we can't talk. I can't legally tell people, hey, this is a low crime area. This is a high crime area.
Right.
I can be the source of the data. I can give them website links. I can send them information about school districts and talk about the desirability and the ratings of certain areas. But I can't say this is a great school. This is not such a great school.
Right.
This is a high crime area. This is low crime. But for the most part, I think that people are looking for what they perceive as a bargain right now.
Right.
And if people have to move across the country to get that, they seem to be willing to do that. And that kind of the crime statistics and the school system not being top notch doesn't seem to be an issue for most of the people that we talk to, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fair.
And we provide the data.
Yeah.
It's just that people don't always want to look at it. They're seeing dollar signs and they're like, this is going to impact my financial future positively.
Yeah.
So I'm going for it,
Now, before we got started in this interview, and this is one of the classic conversations that conservatives, especially in the West, have on a regular basis, is with just say Californians moving in such large numbers. Now, it's certainly arguable as to what factors are impacting the political leanings of states like Colorado, like Arizona, to an extent New Mexico, although we've been a pretty blue state for a pretty long time. Do you expressed concern about that? And I think anybody who cares about our state and the Intermountain West area should be at least concerned about it. Do you think these folks moving in are going to change dramatically New Mexico's political leanings, political approach?
I think it depends on how many of them come.
Right.
Quite honestly, and the real estate trends are definitely going to impact how many of them come here. If the prices go down on the East and West Coast, which we don't see happening in the foreseeable future, few of them are going to come because it's less of an incentive. But I, I think that it's possible. I mean, like you were saying, we've been a pretty blue state for a pretty long time, but what that actually means has become a lot more of an extreme thing over the last few years. And are there going to be enough of them to kind of push us over the edge and turn us into California or turn us into Massachusetts? I don't really know. It depends, I guess, partly on how many of them are really active voters and how many of them get involved in things like what like what we get involved in. You know, making the government what we want it to be. I don't know how active those people are going to be. You know, I haven't. It's. I think that the trend is a little bit too new at this point. Maybe a couple of election cycles, a couple more election cycles could tell the story.
Yeah. No, it's a huge question that I don't expect anybody, even the most well trained, knowledgeable demographic analysts,
Which is
to
not me.
understand. No, no, no. But we've seen, and it's kind of almost a truism on the East Coast, for example. New Yorkers have been moving down to Florida for
Oh, for ages.
decades. Yeah,
Right.
and I'm not saying they haven't had an impact on the politics of Florida,
You can see the point you're making. Yeah.
but also Arizona. I mean, you've seen people moving into Arizona
Right.
for decades, and they're the
Snowbirds.
ones that made Arizona a conservative state in the
Yeah.
first place.
Right.
So I just I'm not a believer necessarily that demographics is destiny, and maybe that's anathema to some of our listeners. I believe that on one hand, and California is a tough one because California, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, but California used to be a pretty well functioning state. I'm talking just as recently as 20 years ago. And
Sure.
they've been a lot more politically balanced than we have in New Mexico. We've been a blue state a lot longer than California
They've
has.
gone back and forth a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that New Mexicans, to an extent, have been just resigned to the fact that government doesn't function well, and we have all of these
Yeah.
bad on the good list, good on the bad, or high on the bad list, low on the good list kind of metrics. And my hope, this is my point. My hope is that people who are whether they're more on the Democratic side or the Republican side, that people coming here say, how can you not function as a government in a way that provides basic quality government services, such as the education system, such as the policing and judicial system, and that they, not because they're conservative or Democrat, but because they believe that government can and should do things more effectively, that
Right.
they push government to do things more effectively. That's my hope. We'll
That's
see.
what I hope so too, because I mean, I'm getting pretty sick of spending tax dollars and not seeing anything positive happen with them.
Right.
You know, and the Spaceport America is another issue, what was the other big
Rail runner.
the film
Yeah.
industry. Like, I feel like there's a little bit of a, and I was talking to Patrick Brenner about this the other day. I feel like there's a little bit of this desire for New Mexicans to be like noticed by big companies, big
Right.
operations like that. And it's just like, we'll throw tax dollars at you, just love us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not good. It's not something that I see as being a positive. It's not good for our state. More dollars go out than come in.
Right.
But it's like this emotional attachment to having a bunch of movies filmed here and having the first civilian, I guess you could call it, space flights take off from here, is this powerful draw. Like, that happened in New Mexico, and
Right.
the numbers associated with it don't even matter. That's
So I want to
problematic.
jump into at least another real estate related issue, and again, it's big picture stuff. But
Sure.
you talked about the importance of low interest rates, and
Mm-hmm.
we've been in that cycle for a long time now. But it can't be this way forever. I mean,
No,
we've
it
had
can't.
historically low interest rates for a very long time now. I'll ask you the personal aspect, but also those interest rates have enabled the kind of insane spending that we've seen out of Washington, D.C. So this is all, again, tied into real estate / public policy, hand in glove, because the financial condition of our country is so reliant at this point on those historically low interest rates because it essentially makes the debt affordable in a way that it wouldn't be with real normal interest rates. But at the same time, the housing market is also relying on those low interest rates. Now, what's your take, just talking about the housing market, if interest rates were to go up, for a sustainable amount of time, a couple of percentage points, would it, is it so reliant on that trend?
I honestly think that it could be beneficial for the interest rates to go up because it would cause the market. In my opinion, I think the market would balance out a little bit more, and that would be a positive thing. Right now, it's so one-sided. It's starting to get a little bit better, but I honestly think that the interest rates going up can be a sign of the economy getting better. And I honestly think I don't think that it would cause a crash if interest rates went up. If they spiked, which I don't see happening, I think that they're going to go up a little bit, relatively speaking, in the next year or so. But I think that it would slow things down a little bit because this insane growth that we've seen in the real estate market all over the nation and in New Mexico specifically, it's too much. It's not sustainable. If we would have thought, I don't know what the exact number is, if somebody would have told me in 2017 that we would see like 15% growth in 1 year in New Mexico, I would have told them that they were insane. And we've seen that kind of thing happen here.
Right.
And it can't stay like this forever. So I'm looking forward to the time when it starts to kind of balance out. For example, in our local multiple listing service, we have, which covers Albuquerque, but there's some listings in Santa Fe up there, Taos, 1 or 2 in Red River, down Los Lunas, those kinds of places, all of Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, Corrales. I looked last night in preparation for this, and there was 1,160 active listings in our MLS. And that is, I don't even know what the right adjective for that is, but that's terrible. We want to see
too few.
Too few.
Right.
Too few. Yeah, to be clear. We want to see 3,500 to 4,500 active in our MLS at any given time. I don't know exactly what our absorption rate is right now. I'll tell you, in the luxury market has really changed since the last time we had this conversation. But in June, let me pull up some statistics about the luxury market. There was a one.
So what's the luxury market?
The luxury market in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, when I got into the business, was 500,000 and up.
Okay.
Right now, it's about 600,000 and up.
Okay. And
it's not immune anymore to this supply and demand issue like it used to be. We're seeing some of the same issues. The median days on market in June for luxury listings were days on market was 4. So wow. 50% of them were on market for 4 days,
okay,
or less. Closed luxury sales in the last 12 months, year over year, up 93%. Number of luxury homes for sale is down by 37%, which is creating more demand, which is driving the prices up and creating more competition. The absorption rate of luxury listings, lower than 2006, 1.1 month supply. So if all the brokers in New Mexico or in Albuquerque and the surrounding areas stopped listing luxury properties, in 1.1 month there would be no luxury properties on the market, which is just, it's a little bit crazy because it was a buyer's market in the luxury side of things last time we had this conversation, and now that has shifted, which is. Maybe we got a little off topic there, but that was really
this is
interesting.
actually dovetails nicely with my next question, which is, in a quote normal free market, we're market guys here, you get supply and demand, so sure. Prices go up,
absolutely,
and you have an increase in supply. Now, there have been some hiccups in the timber market, the lumber market, and kind of supplies have definitely increased in price. Whether that's broader inflation across the economy or temporary hiccups in the, due to COVID getting back to normal, we'll leave that aside. But there's not a lot of, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong, but this is why I have you on the podcast. As I see it, I haven't seen a ton of building of houses going on here in Albuquerque proper. There has been, if you go
Oh yeah,
out
go
in Rio
west. Yeah,
Rancho,
Universe and Paseo. See that?
okay,
That's like exploding right now. There's Hakes Brothers, Abrazo, um, Westway. They're all
yeah,
building a ton of
up on the
houses up there.
escarpment is what you're
Yes.
referring to.
Yeah.
But the main housing that I see being built in the Albuquerque area is kind of in the outer Rio Rancho,
Yeah.
550.
A little bit in this area that we're in right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Juan Tabo south of Central, so
Yeah.
kind of a
Voltaire.
infill-ish area.
Right.
But do you
Montesa Park, what used to be Montesa
do
Park.
you see housing being built at an adequate pace? Is this just the market trying to play catch up to trends?
It's
Are there issues fundamentally within the Albuquerque marketplace, whether it's lack of land or regulatory concerns or something else? Go through that for us a little bit.
So I think that the supply chain was screwed up
Sure.
because of COVID. Prices went up, and then we had a builder who bought a piece of land, an infill type of a thing, subdivided it, and built two houses on it. It ended up costing her like $60,000 more than she was expecting, just cut right into her bottom line. And my opinion, I don't work in new construction a ton, but I think that the builders have probably gotten started a little bit too late. They should have started this a long time ago. Nobody could have really predicted that, but I think that they got started a little bit late. It doesn't seem to be having that much of an impact as far as relieving some of the pressure on the market right now. There is a lot of it coming up, and maybe when a lot more of those houses are finished, it's tough to say. There's just so many dang buyers out there and so many new people coming in all the time. I mean, we get referrals regularly from people wanting to transfer out here. We don't always close with them, but they're I don't think it's enough.
Right.
Basically, the infill projects and everything are great, but most of the time those cater to a higher end client, because the places where they happen the most are that we see are down in like the North Valley or Corrales, where there's some property that's been there for 4 or 5 acres. It's been there occupied by the same family for 150 years, and there's an old beat up house on it. Somebody tears it down and builds 5 luxury homes on it. So it's just, and we're surrounded by, we have mountains on the east, and then we
Right.
have the area to the northwest, mostly north, where Rio Rancho goes out, and then everything else we're surrounded by reservation land. So I think that at some point we're going to start like what's happening downtown and Nob Hill area, is they're building up, and then the condo lifestyle and the gentrification sort of thing starts to happen a little bit more, But
Well, let's talk about that. There are, shall we say, and I'll personal story here. So in about, let's see, 98, 99, Washington, D.C. area was rapidly, and I mean Washington, D.C. actually, was rapidly gentrifying. I mean,
which is where you were at
right.
that time, right?
They had gone through an era of some really difficult times where, going back to the Martin Luther King assassination riots, large swaths of Washington, D.C. had been burned and never really
Recovered.
rehabilitated. You'd had a crackhead, God's honest truth, crackhead mayor of Washington,
Oh, yeah. I
D.C.,
remember
Marion
that guy.
Barry.
Marion Barry.
And then you had kind of this conservatorship where Congress put a guy named Anthony Williams in charge of the city government, and he was a much more straight-laced, reasonable guy when it came to government. And so Washington, D.C. just started to boom, and you saw a tremendous amount of gentrification, i.e., people who wanted to move into a city doing so. And I happened to be part of that situation and made the greatest real estate purchase of my entire life during that time frame, circa 99, 2000, 2001, when I co-purchased a place up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Now,
Sweet.
so yeah.
Do you still own it?
No, I sold it, and so I locked in those gains very quickly. But
Nice.
anyway, that is a trend that I think we see here in Albuquerque. A lot of historically very challenged areas where the war zone or
Albuquerque High School, the old Albuquerque High School, turned into something
that's
totally
true,
different. Yeah.
and that's a positive.
Yeah.
But like there's Central, up and down Central from basically Eubank down to, you could at least say, San Mateo. Further down, you get into Nob Hill, which is a pretty nice area, but a lot of that area has been struggling. Let's
Right.
say that, and that's not the only area with significant crime and homelessness issues. Do you see people willing to venture into some of those fringier areas? Do you see prospects for the gentrification, urban revitalization efforts here in Albuquerque?
Yeah, yeah. People are being kind of forced into those kinds of situations a little bit because they're getting priced out of the market by people with more money, either from in-state or out of state. But we have somebody that we're not working with them, but it's somebody that we're close to, and they are moving into an area that I would think, wow. And the house is really
Wow.
the house is really wow. Kind of describes it. Like, it's not a terrible area, but I actually lived in that area several years ago, and it's not a great area. It's right by a park where there's been some crime issues that we witnessed personally, and the house itself is really really trashed as well. And people are just like, I just want something. I'm willing to put in I'm seeing a little bit more of a can-do attitude. I can come in, I can make this better, which I think is fantastic. People are
Sure.
definitely showing a little bit more adventure with that because they're getting forced to. They don't have a choice. They want to lock in their gains, like you were talking about. I have this, $380,000 house that has gone up significantly just in the last couple years, and I can sell that and take big gains on it, and then I can turn around and buy this $200,000 house and fix it up and turn it into something better and improve the neighborhood. I don't know how many people necessarily have that attitude on a large scale, but we are starting to see it more. And it's not because people want to do it necessarily. It's because they feel like if they want to make a move, they feel like they have to go.
Sure.
They have to do that.
Yeah, and that's great, and I agree with you. And that was kind of our mentality when we made the decision to co-purchase this house. It was another guy and myself who kind of looked at this as an investment opportunity, and back in Washington D.C. in
Sounds
that
like it was
area.
a score.
It was, and it can be. Those are the high risk, high reward kind of opportunities.
You gotta have the guts.
And I think, I guess, it really hits home. This whole issue, and I guess we'll kind of conclude in maybe in this vein. It seems to me that if folks here in Albuquerque, more so with the housing, but just broadly economically, but in particular, the crime and the homelessness issue. I mean, when you're out showing houses around and there are homeless on every single street corner,
Awkward.
maybe if you're in California, you're used to that sort of thing, but not everybody. And
It's getting
even
worse.
myself, I mean, as somebody who's lived here for now 15 years, this was not the way things
No,
happened.
it's gotten significantly worse.
So I know, again, it's complicated, but is that how much of a deterrent is that, and how much of that is something that, gosh, if we just clean this kind of thing up, Albuquerque could be just so much better even than it is now.
So to start, I want to say that I have a lot of compassion for the homeless people in Albuquerque. When you get into that cycle, it's so difficult to get out of it, and it seems like more and more people have gotten into that cycle because just like you said, we're seeing a lot more of it now. But about a year ago, I was closing on a property and we were getting ready to do a final walkthrough, and it was up near Manal and Tramway, and there's a guy that's around, a homeless guy. He's obviously got some mental illness issues and whatever, and he's always around there. And when I was driving up to the property, the people were behind me. This guy was out on the street and he was doing his thing. He was talking to somebody that nobody else could see, and probably schizophrenic. Really sweet guy. I've actually talked to him once or twice, but I was just like, oh no, these people are going to feel like they're moving into a neighborhood that is not safe for them and that there's a homeless problem here. And their attitude was just like, we feel very fortunate to have gotten this house, and we're going to overlook that, you know. But on a large scale, I don't see it that much because of the areas that I tend to work in. And people have access to the data, and people also drive the neighborhood independently of me if we're working with buyers. We don't, when we have listings, we haven't had any issues with buyers coming to us through their broker saying, hey, what's this homelessness issue like in this area, and that's going to impact our buying decision. Because people just don't have the luxury to do that right now. You know, they've once they get something under contract, most people have already tried to buy at least a few other houses, and they're just like, this is the decision that we've made, and we're going to live with it. Having said that, I think that the local government really needs to do something to help these people that they're not doing. You know, there's too many of them for the capacity of places like Joy Junction and the Good Shepherd Center and Albuquerque Rescue Mission. We need more of that kind of thing. And I don't think that those subsidized little hut thing houses, it's not working.
Yeah.
We need to rehabilitate these people.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's that's a whole different
It
challenge
is a whole
for
other
sure.
conversation. Yeah.
And I implied that might be the last question, but that'll be like 1A and this is 1B because it's
Okay.
related. I
All right.
promise you. So Rio Grande Foundation actually right at the start of COVID moved downtown,
Right.
and we have documented and illustrated the significant challenges involving the homeless problem and the challenges downtown. Also, the lack of businesses down there, especially killed during COVID,
Sure.
maybe during the George Floyd riots. Are you seeing people interested in living in downtown Albuquerque? I mean, I know that's a relatively small portion of our overall real estate market, but what do you see?
I have not sold a single condo or townhome to somebody in the downtown area or the Nob Hill area during my career. It's just, that's kind of a niche.
Okay.
That's kind of a niche. I do those kinds of properties, but in other parts of town. But every once in a while, I'll have somebody kind of ask for cursory information about what it's like to live downtown. My brother actually lives downtown.
Okay.
But he's leasing the place. And, but I think that people are willing to go to whatever area they feel like they can have the quality. I mean, wanting to live in the Northeast Heights and wanting to live in the downtown area, those are two very different people. People don't look for a house in the Northeast Heights and then,
Right.
yeah, let's go look downtown. That doesn't happen so much.
Interesting.
But people it kind of goes dovetails, to use your term, with the question about, are people willing to move into these other areas that aren't so super desirable? And you'd have to ask another realtor about that exact.
Well, fair enough. I can tell you when my wife and I, who we didn't have any kids at that point, we moved here from the DC area.
Right.
We considered all of our options.
Right.
And, I would say downtown was in a different state at the time. There hadn't been quite as many efforts to revitalize it at
Right.
that point. But we looked at places like the Albuquerque High Lofts and some other more urban-oriented housing. And we were surprised at how much more expensive those places were than a traditional house,
Like per square foot.
Yeah. And in a
They were
suburban
new
is a
They were
is a term
new
of
and
art.
shiny at the time too.
True, but when you consider the pros and cons of an apartment versus a actual house, I think, especially in an area, it's one thing to have the hip, cool area in, well, darn it, pick almost prior to COVID, almost any American city. Downtowns have been booming. I mean, I'm born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, a place that had a consistent challenge with their downtown area, but downtown Cincinnati has boomed to the point where it is the place to be
Super
for the
desirable.
young singles. Not to mention the New Yorks and the DCs and all the big cities.
Mm-hmm.
Albuquerque has never been able to achieve that equation. Now,
Right.
Nob Hill's another one. That is an area that, when we moved here, was and remains to an extent kind of the hotbed of the nightlife and those kinds of things. It's lost, I think, a lot of its luster due to the crime and due to the other challenges.
It has. But the prices, people are still
but the prices are still
they're still
very high.
strong.
So interesting.
People
Well,
still want to go there.
for all your housing needs outside of Nob Hill in the downtown DC area,
Or in those
or
areas, hey.
downtown Albuquerque area, I'm sorry, contact Evan Jones, and I'll let you give your information again for people who might have missed it the first time.
Sure. Again, my name is Evan Jones. I'm an associate broker with Keller Williams Albuquerque. I work with buyers and sellers really all over Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, Corrales, even in Los Lunas sometimes. My number is 505-600-5510, and my email address is jonesnextdoor@kw.com. Me and my wife are a small KW team called Jones Next Door.
All right. Thanks, Evan. Always good catching up and a
Yeah.
lot of great information
Thank
there.
you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.